If you're setting up a home studio for voiceover, vocal, or instrument recording, a preamp and channel strip can be a great way to improve your workflow and your quality. Today I'm going to take a look at the ART Voice Channel and DBX 286s, two popular channel strips that can help you get things done. A microphone preamp is a type of amplifier that boosts the signal level of your microphone so that you can make recordings. Now, audio interfaces generally have one built in, but sometimes it's useful to have an external preamp. They can add extra color and saturation, really improve the overall tone of your voice. And if you add in EQ, compression, and other processing effects, we have what's called a channel strip. And the ART Voice Channel and DBX 286s both fall into that category. With their preamps and built-in effects, they really give you a lot of flexibility to dial in exactly the sound that you want with the right microphone. So looking at the two units, it's obvious that the ART Voice Channel has a lot more controls on it than the DBX 286s does, but we'll walk through each section and we'll talk about what the differences are. So to start out with, we'll get into the preamps. Now, the ART Voice Channel is a tube preamp. It has a 12AX7, or you can use a 7025 tube in here. That's basically what's helping to give you the gain here and also give you some color and saturation. And going along with that, there is a tube voltage which can be used at normal or high. I'm not going to switch it back and forth because you actually have to allow about 2 or 3 minutes for the voltage to go up or down. But what that does essentially is change the saturation and coloration. The higher voltage actually will give you a clearer sound, not transparent, but more transparent, whereas the normal will give you actually a warmer tone from the tube. And again, you can change the tube out. It'll give you a little bit of difference in saturation. Doesn't change the EQ. Tubes typically don't do anything with that, but it will change the saturation and therefore the coloration. And so we have that. We have gain here that goes up to 60 decibels on the ART Voice Channel. We do have a pad switch which attenuates about 20 decibels, but it actually varies as we go across as to what percentage that takes away. So if you have a very loud source, you can use the pad control on that. It also has an invert. Invert changes the phase, which will change the tone, and sometimes it'll sound better one way or the other depending on the phase if you're trying to overlay something else. So I'll just leave it in the standard configuration for now. And the other thing that the ART Voice Channel has is an impedance control. And so you can actually change the impedance sensitivity of the preamp in this voice channel, and that also will make a difference in the tone. I'll go ahead and drop it down, and you can hear the difference actually as I do that. And then I'll bring it back up, and you can hear it there as well. And now moving over to the DBX 286s, this is a fully solid state preamp, so no tubes in here. It also has a gain of up to 60 decibels. It's a fairly clean boost that's available on this one. Controls, I didn't mention on the other one, of course, we have phantom power available on both units, so that is an option that you can use if you have condenser microphones, you want to use a mic booster, something like that. Gain meter, of course, here on the DBX 286s. You don't have a gain meter on the voice channel per se. The meters you're seeing here are the compression, reduction, and then the overall output level. So a gain level here is something that the DBX has that the ART doesn't have. Both of these sections here, as part of the preamp section, will also have what we call a low cut or a high pass filter. And so the idea is that if I press this in here while I'm talking on the DBX 286s, it's going to attenuate signal or frequency below 80 hertz. And so that's just going to take some of that low rumble out. Maybe if you got an air conditioner running in the background, it might help. And we have the same thing up here on the ART Voice Channel. I have it engaged right now. I'll go ahead and turn it off, and now you can hear without that. And it's very natural on the ART Voice Channel. You don't hear it a lot, and I kind of like that. The next section we'll look at here is the compressor section. Now again, starting on the ART Voice Channel, this compressor gives us a number of options. We have attack, release, ratio, and threshold. And threshold is basically the sound level where it starts to act, and you'll see it is acting. As I get louder, it's going to go ahead and reduce more. The ratio is how much it reduces as I get over the threshold. Then we have our attack and a release. That's how quickly it's going to respond and let go based on, again, the loud transients. Now, when we go over to the DBX 286s, it's a little simpler control. There's only two dials. There's drive and density. And you'll see it also has a gain reduction meter. And as I speak louder, it's going to have more light up for further reduction. Now, the drive, what this is doing is actually twofold. It's adding makeup gain while it's also going to take away more. So it increases the level of compression, but also increases the makeup gain. Designed for a little simpler operation. The density, on the other hand, can controls how sensitive the compressor is going to be to the sound. And so turning it up, you'll see I'm getting more reduction there. Turning it down, I'm getting less reduction, but it's all about the sensitivity to what I'm doing. So that's the compression stage. Well, the way these are configured here on the DBX, we go directly from the preamp to the compressor. On the ART voice channel, we actually have a switch for EQ position. So we can either have the EQ come after the compressor or have it come before the compressor. And I'll talk about that in a minute when I get to it. But the next thing I want to touch on here is a de-esser, and we have that on both units as well. On the ART voice channel, we're allowed to select thresholds, so the level at which the de-esser will start to kick in, and then we're given a de-esser frequency. And the idea is, depending on who's speaking, you can adjust this so that it will be in line with where the sibilant frequencies are. Sibilant. That gives you the control over de-esser. When we go over to the DBX 286s, much the same thing. We get a frequency and a threshold, so it's going to work the same way. We can adjust the frequency level at which it actuates. Most people, it's going to be somewhere between about 5 and 8K. And then we have the threshold, which is, again, typically how loud the sibilant has to be before it starts to reduce. And it's not given in decibels on the DBX, it's just given as a number. And that's something, again, with both units. The DBX 286s just tends to have a scale of 1 to 10 for each of the controls, whereas the ART is actually given in decibels and in hertz, other than the de-esser on the DBX has hertz as well. Something we'll get into next here on the ART voice channel is this expander and gate. And it has a switch that allows us to do either an expander or a gate. A gate will completely close, whereas if we put expansion, what it'll do is it'll progressively reduce the sound as things get lower and lower. The expander gate is at the end of the chain on the DBX 286 here, and much the same idea. We have a threshold that we set, so how loud it has to be before it opens up, if you will, and then a ratio, much like the compressor, where it's going to reduce by that amount every time we go over. So positioned a little differently on here, but work very, very similar. Next, we get into the EQ. And I already mentioned with the ART voice channel that I have a button that I can switch and put the EQ either before the compressor or after the compressor. And the reason you'd want to do that is, if you put the EQ before the compressor, what happens then is as you adjust the EQ, the compressor probably is going to need to be adjusted as well because it'll be more sensitive to the lower tones. The advantage, though, of that is that if I put the EQ after, what I can do is I can boost the bass or reduce the bass, and it won't have an impact on the amount of compression. Whereas if I have it before, if I add more bass, it'll actually end up compressing more. So let's go ahead and see what that does. So I have it post, and if I take the bass, and I'll use bass because the low frequency is where you're going to hear this the most. Right now I have the low frequency set at 150 hertz, and as I boost it up, you're going to hear a lot more bass start to kick in, but the compression isn't going to change. As I reduce it, again, you're going to have less bass, but the compression isn't going to change. Now, if I move the EQ before the compressor, what will happen is as I increase the bass, the compressor, as you can see, is going to act more and reduce things more and more, so it'll have less impact. And as I take it away, again, it's going to have less impact because the compressor is not being affected by that. So that can be a question where you're going to insert the EQ. Now, it's a 4-band EQ on the ART, and what we have is, again, the lowest band can either be 50 or 150 hertz. The middle two bands are variable, and we get quite a bit of range in them, and we can control the frequency as well as the boost or cut. And then the high frequency gives us either 5 kilohertz or 15 kilohertz. And again, depending what we're wanting to do for the tone, right now I have it on 5 kilohertz, and you'll see it makes quite a difference as I turn it up and as I will turn it back down in terms of the overall tone for voice. Whereas if I go to the 15 kilohertz, it's going to make less of a difference. You'll still hear it up there at the top, but it will have less of a difference because the vocal range for my voice is not so much up there. So that's kind of something you have. You also get an EQ bypass, and so if you want to completely bypass the EQ on the ART, it's easy to do that with that one button. Now on the DBX 286, it has what's called an enhancer, and it has low frequency and high frequency detail, they call it. And essentially the low frequency, what happens is as you increase this, it increases very low frequencies and actually decreases some just above it. So if you think of like in a Pultec EQ where you can have, say, a boost in that 80 hertz range followed by a cut at around 200 hertz, this applies it simultaneously as you turn it up and down. And then the high end is increasing progressively the presence all the way kind of from the mid presence tones about 2 kilohertz and up. And that will increase the clarity in some cases, but also can have an effect on sibilance. So you just need to be aware of that as well. So less control on the DBX 286s versus the ART. It's in some ways simpler to use, but it's also less flexible in terms of getting it to be set up properly for a variety of microphones and voices. So if you want to use this for voiceover and you really want to dial things in with your microphone, the ART voice channel is going to have a lot more flexibility on that. Finally, mention here where the DBX had an input gain meter, the ART voice channel is going to give us output, both in terms of peak as well as VU. And that's really nice to have, in that we can get a sense of the average overall level as well as where the peaks are. And so again, we have that. Both of them have an output level, and the idea is that we can adjust the overall gain on the output side versus what's happening through the units, so we can balance it essentially one to the other. The DBX 286s has a full bypass, so if I actually press the bypass, it's going to get rid of all the compressor, de-esser, enhancer, and gate, and just give me the preamp. On the ART voice channel, we don't have that. What we need to do is manually bypass everything. So that means pressing the EQ bypass, taking the expander gate and turning it all the way off, and also turning the compressor all the way off simply by reducing here the ratio all the way to nothing. So if I do that, now I have bypass, but it's not as convenient. So a little bit of variance on the two units, a lot more granular control on the voice channel than the DBX. Both will do a similar job. I'm using an SM7B again here with both of these units, and hopefully you could hear as I was switching back and forth and adjusting the controls, sort of the range of adjustment you have available. And just one last thing here on the ART is the control here for sample rate. And what this does is allows us to change the sample rate frequency, because this has digital input-output on it as well, and it also has a USB connection. And I'll get into that when we look at the rear connections on them. But it allows us to do that. It also lets us change our optical connection between Toslink and ADAT. And the control's blinking right now because I have this disconnected from my clock so that it's not synced up with the interface and everything else. I'm just using analog only on the ART right now. But it has that additional digital I/O, which is nice if you have an interface that has ADAT in, then you can go ahead and use that instead of taking up one of your analog inputs. So there can be advantages with that as well. DBX 286s is strictly an analog unit. Taking a look at the rear connections on the ART voice channel, you can see we have a balanced microphone and line input. And this is really great in that if you want to connect in a guitar amp directly or even a keyboard, you can do that. You also have a microphone preamp out, so if you want to send this out to some other effects, you can do that as well. And the insert in lets you bring in other sources so that you can take advantage of the effects on the ART only without using the preamp. Then we get an XLR and a 1/4-inch output jack. Again, both of these are balanced. We also have connections directly to the analog to digital converters. And this unit is not just an analog preamp and channel. It also has digital connections, so we can use ADAT, optical output, SPDIF, as well as USB connection directly to a computer. And again, I'll have more details in my full review. There's even word clock connections on this unit, so it's really great as part of a digital studio. Now, the DBX 286s has a far more basic set of inputs and outputs on the rear panel. When we take a look, we see it has a microphone and a line level input again, both balanced, as well as a balanced output. And then we have an insert jack, and you need a special cable for this. It's going to allow you to, again, have a preamp out and an insert in. So again, you can run outboard effects with this preamp, or you can take advantage of the built-in effects for sources other than the preamp that's built into the DBX 286. I'll be doing a full review of each of these channel strips, as well as a setup guide to help get you going in your studio. But whether you prefer the flexibility of the ART or the simplicity of the DBX, both of these channel strips can get the job done. And if you're wondering what to do about an audio interface and a microphone, check out one of these videos. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.